Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where sales leaders teach you what's working for them so you can build it yourself. Feeling ready to kick your sales into high gear? We're here to help. Check out our sales coaching and consulting services at predictablerevenue.com. Welcome back to the Predictable Revenue Podcast. I'm your host, Colin Stewart. Today, I'm joined by April MacLean. She's the founder at Wondry, and we're going to talk about how to create a community. April, welcome to the show.
Thanks. That was a great intro.
Thank you. Much better than the original take where I just kind of said, April MacLean, Wondry.
Founder of Wondry. Yeah.
Founder of Wondry.
I'm glad to be here.
This conversation we met through Techstars as mentors, although I'm not really sure I can call myself a mentor. I didn't get picked. I just kind of chip in and add to the little sheet every now and then, but I did do the mentor madness. So, I guess it counts.
Yeah.
But we met because I was starting a community. I've got that founder newsletter. And I was like, hey, I want to April Know's community. I want to pick her brain. We kind of did this podcast. And then at the end, I was like, hey, I probably should have recorded this. So this is going to be a little bit of a re-recording of me grilling April on how to create a community, why we should create communities, the outcomes, and then basically we're going to get into the nitty-gritty, geeky details of how you do it. Ready for this, April?
Batman. Yeah.
Thanks, Batman. So why should somebody think about creating a community? If they're sitting there listening, they're probably thinking of like a Slack community, of a Discord that they're in. They're like, I've got this one on my WhatsApp and I have it on mute because it doesn't, just all it does is bother me. So why should I think about creating a community?
Well, I do think communities are being launched very willy-nilly without much thought or strategy behind them. So I'm pretty aware of the fact that people are getting jaded about the idea of community, but that's because they're seeing it done incorrectly often. The very short answer is, in my humble opinion, it is the highest defensibility that you can build. So as much as we like to convince ourselves otherwise, almost everything else can be duplicated. People can make the widgets we make. They can use the business model we use. But the one thing that they cannot just duplicate is a community. And if you're able to bring your customers into such an intimate relationship that they are in your orbit at all times, that's just something that's sort of impenetrable.
I love that. I think it's and I've heard a number of creators talk about the kind of owned media so that you're not beholden to a platform.
Right.
Like you've got a good following on LinkedIn. I've got a okay following on LinkedIn, but what was it? What was the quote? I think it was Tim Ferriss interviewed somebody and he said, it's like his whole business was based on 2 Facebook pages. And like, what does it feel like? What is your experience? He's like, I feel like I have the most profitable McDonald's in the world on top of an active volcano.
That is great. That is exactly right. That rug can be pulled out at any moment.
Totally. And so when we're talking about communities, it sounds like we're talking about that kind of owned media where you own the community. Doesn't matter what the platform is, but it is something that you have control over, or mostly control over.
Yes. And that really has a direct correlation with the platform you build. I mean, obviously you're talking about platform, but even to take this step further, there's a lot of platform options out there and not all of them allow you to own that data. So part of it is choosing to host your community on a space that you can literally just download a list of all members and email addresses. And not all platforms allow you to do that.
Well, this episode brought to you by Thinkific. No, I'm just kidding.
No, it is not. For shame.
The founders are buddies of mine, so we've been using it for a long time. That's okay. I'm going to send this to Greg and Matt. They're going to
just that one sound clip and my address.
Yeah. This is going to be the thing that goes in our YouTube.
That's great. That's what I want.
It's funny when they were starting the company. Well, I think they'd started like an LSAT course because Greg, the founder, is a lawyer. I don't know if he's in active practicing or if he still has his whatever, but he built like an LSAT prep course. And his brother is a CTO. And so his brother built it for him. And then that was the genesis of Thinkific.
Oh.
And in the early days when they were pivoting from like LSAT test course, I can't remember the name of it. They actually flew, or Aaron was up in Vancouver. Aaron Ross, my original co-founder, the guy who wrote the book, was in Vancouver. And I had organized, this is before Aaron and I had partnered. Greg was looking for other creators and thought leaders and influencers. And so I set them up. And so before Aaron and I partnered, Greg had recorded all the videos for Aaron to be on the Thinkific platform. Like that's how kind of getting out into it they were. Like he had the camera, he did all the editing, he did all the sound, the lighting, everything. And like,
there seems to be a podcast that's just called Scrappy Stories. And it's just these, because these are the ones that I find so much more inspiring than the new raise round or IPO or whatever. I think that's so cool. It also sends me my brain on a little bit of a tangent. I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts yesterday. It's called Hidden Brain. And they were talking about, this woman was talking about how they did this long study on entrepreneurs, novices versus experts. And she gave the criteria behind what it was, because they wanted to identify what really is the difference between a beginner entrepreneur and advanced. And it shocked the hell out of me, and it made me change my mind about something I had a very strong conviction about. Because in Techstars, I'm always talking to the companies about, be careful of solution in search of problem. Don't fall in love with this like gadget or tool or this idea or something and then go, okay, now where's the problem that I can solve? And this woman was actually saying, beginning entrepreneurs search for a big problem to solve. Advanced entrepreneurs examine their own resources and aptitudes and competencies first, and then figure out what to do with them. So instead of, here's this goal, I'm going to move towards it, it's here I am, how can I pull things towards me? And that. But when you're talking about the Thinkific guys, it's like they started with an aptitude that they had, something they knew really well, not with like, there needs to be a platform for courses in the world.
Totally. If I can refine your point a little bit, because I agree with that assessment. And I think the example to make fun of me is my first startup, Voltage CRM. I spent 10 years working on CRM as a salesperson, not as a sales geeky kid in the office. And so everybody's like, oh, yeah, he could do the CRM. He probably knows how to hook up a database, blah, 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 blah. I didn't, but I could figure it out. And when I started the company, I started with, okay, this is a thing that I know. And I had some really helpful insights, but I built out my ideas. And so I built a product first, and then I went to try and solution it around. And I think the right answer would have been a combination of the two. Obviously, start with my strengths and the insight that I had, but then go out and see in the market and say, how do I best apply this insight to helping them?
Yeah, that's exactly what she was saying. Yeah, there's awesome. Like that little mid-wedge that got in the way there. Yeah.
Totally. Okay, cool. Communities. We talked about why and the own media, but I think I'm in a number of communities I'm in one for Clay, and it's more of a support community, and it's a Slack, and I jump in there when I have a problem. They're shockingly good at like a real Clay person, not a real person made it of clay, but a real person from Clay. But it is funnier if you imagine them all as claymation people, which would just be incredible. Yeah. So keep that visual. A real claymation person on the other end very quickly replying. And like that's a huge value add because it's a complex platform. And so they need that. I don't think it's generating revenue, but it certainly is helping. And so, and then I look at some of these others and I'm like, I'm pointing at my phone, in case you didn't notice. I've got a few communities that live on my phone that are just, sometimes I read them, but most of the time I'm like, they're on mute. What are the different reasons why, or the different kind of outcomes that you could achieve with a community?
Yeah. So the first answer I gave about defensibility, et cetera, is just this like high umbrella. Why should I even start thinking about community as a strategy to begin with? But you're right. They do serve very specific outcomes. And from a business perspective, because there's plenty of communities that are for hobbies and other things, you should not start a community unless you can directly tie it to a business outcome, because it will absolutely become the bottom of the priority list. And the only thing worse than a dead community is a half-breathing community associated with your brand. I'm making zombie motions for people listening. That was my zombie.
Really good zombie. I'm scared. Terrified.
Terrified. You're like a golden retriever. I think you have one facial expression for every emotion that you feel. Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah. Eventually people are going to figure out I'm like the next GPT, but not yet.
Colin GPT.
Mm-hmm. It hasn't figured out facial expressions yet.
Emulate mine. No, don't. That would be terrifying, actually. So there's an old model called Spaces that was the first way that most of us learned to think about business outcomes as they relate to communities. I don't quite think about it that way anymore, but I think it's helpful to visit. So Spaces stands for support, product, acquisition, content, engagement, and success. And it was like all brand communities tend to fall into one of these buckets primarily. again, I've moved away from that. And what I see is there's 2.5 primary outcomes for a community. I think the two major ones are it's simply retention or acquisition, period. And the half is because there's a select group of people who will start a community and they don't have a product. They don't have any idea. They're actually using the community as sort of an R&D play. They want to learn about the community and then they'll figure out what to make. So that's like a half. And I don't use that often because I don't think a lot of people have that luxury. But for a company, retention or acquisition, so what you're talking about with Clay, support communities are retention plays because they help people stick around longer because you're getting to use the product more easily. You're getting through your problems more quickly. You're getting to full product adoption. So even success models, support models, any of that feed right into retention models. So I sort of think that those are the two primary outcomes.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about the acquisition standpoint until you started talking about it. I was like, oh yeah, I'm in a couple of Slack communities. I think Divinate is a company I met through my founder community, had replied to one of the emails and we were having a chat. And I was like, oh, I want you to build this. They do, it's like conversational intelligence around identifying jobs to be done, like unmet needs from your product or your customer development conversations. And I was like, hey, that sounds cool, but plug it into my Chorus or my Fathom or my note taker app. So it just happens automatically. So anytime my salespeople are this and that, they're doing that. So if anybody's listening, you're already doing that, let me know. But if you want to follow along, Divinate's got a Slack community where I'm trying to bully their engineers into building that for me. And that's
the 7 layers of geek with Colin. There's always
yeah, totally. So like that, I guess that would be an example of it's kind of a mix of R&D because they're getting customer feedback, but they're also, it's a customer acquisition channel. It's right on their site and it's so much more interactive. I find 5 years ago, I never would have jumped into a Slack community cold, but now I see a Slack community. I'm like, oh, let's see what's live here. Yeah. I think Clay was probably my like gateway drug into, hey, Slack communities can be good. They can be helpful.
Yeah, they can. And there's also, I also think there's a play here where brands will often launch communities that have no immediate correlation with their business. In other words, you'll get into a community that's like marketing hacks, but that's a terrible name for a community. Don't name it that. But there are communities named that, and they're in there talking about quote unquote marketing hacks, but it's actually run by a company. But they're choosing not to name the community out of their company because it'll attract a broader network of people that are simply interested in the space that they occupy. Becomes a little bit like HubSpot. They use the term inbound on all of their things. They don't call inbound HubCon. And I think it's a very smart move because inbound is not a word that they invented. It's not even a strategy that they invented, but they capitalize on it so well and they associate their brand with the name inbound so well that when people think inbound, they think HubSpot. It's like saying, oh, when people think, I don't know, churn, they think blah, blah, blah. It's so odd that they now own this word that's common vernacular. So that's totally part of it as well.
Price intelligently, Patrick Campbell. I know they're not called that anymore. They changed the name to Profit Well, I think, but I still think of them as Price Intelligent.
I do too.
It's a great name.
Yeah.
It's a great name.
So brilliant too.
Mm-hmm. Love those guys. So we've talked a little bit about platforms, but a community is not just a platform. And so I want to get into, we've talked about, retention, acquisition, or R&D, but say I want to do one of those things. Are all communities, am I going to do it differently if I'm doing it for retention or activation or acquisition?
I think that there's first principles regardless of what kind of community you're going to launch. So there's definitely strategic tweaks between retention and acquisition. And they are very dependent on your business model as well. Obviously, retention communities work splendidly for subscription-based business models. But in terms of how you do it, the building blocks are similar. And it all starts with awareness. You need to have called enough attention, created enough awareness around what you do that you have an asset like an email list. An email list is my preferred asset when I'm working with clients. Sometimes people will have huge Instagram followings and we can try to work with that. The conversion is harder. But it really, like, your email list is your key to starting your community, because converting people who have already given you your email address is so much easier than going out and trying to recruit first members. So awareness, and then there's like the whole conversion piece. There is the kind of launch season, and then there's the post-launch season, and all of that is the same no matter what kind of community you're going to launch.
So let me just get the bullet points here. It was awareness and that kind of access to your community, and then
so if we're going to get even more granular, the way that we work with clients is, let's say someone comes to us and says, so we want you to build a community plan for us. Our first question is, what are your assets? What do you have, so that we know that we can reach whatever goal, however many people you want to start with. And then the next thing we do is we'll research competitors' communities, or communities that are competitive, even if they're not attached to a competitor. Our favorite tool, one of our favorite tools, is Gummy Search. So if you're doing research on a community, Gummy Search is an incredible tool. It's basically a tool that where you can tell it's based on Reddit, where every subject is on Reddit. But you tell this tool, hey, look, I want to know from our travel, our solo travel, our travel on a shoestring, you can tell it all the relevant subreddits. I want to know what they're talking about. It'll go and scrape all of those subreddits for whatever time frame you give it, and it will bucket out what it found. Here's the most engaged posts. Here is the anger and pain points. Here is whatever. Like, it gives you all of these things. And so all in one stop, like within 10 minutes, you have a look into what people are really talking about. And that helps you with two things. One, it helps you figure out what sort of subjects you might want to introduce in your community. But two, it helps you understand what you don't want in your community, which is equally as important, because there's a lot of riffraff. And if you can identify what is starting the riffraff, you can keep it out. So we do research in that area. And then the next thing we do is we start developing the community, meaning choosing the platform, getting it set up, thinking about the information architecture inside of it, while simultaneously starting to try to convert audience into community. So some best practices, we always an application to get into the community, because if I can just pause and take a tangent, gating is one of the most important decisions you'll make about your community, like who you keep out. Because communities, I didn't coin this phrase, but communities are inclusively exclusive. So you have to have a couple layers of filters, because it can't be for everybody. So there's always an application process. People are applying to be a founding member. There's a bit of screening going on for that starting culture while we're building out the platform. And then it's a matter of actual launch, having a launch day event, knowing what you're going to talk about in the community. So a little bit of light programming, but the biggest rookie mistake is over programming your community, because I use the phrase design minimally and respond expansively, or expand dynamically. Those words are all hard to put together, but just a little at first, and then respond to what the community needs, rather than like 10 channels and 7 mixers and stuff that nobody really wants right now, because they don't know each other.
Got it. Okay, so thank you for that. The high level is like, it starts with the assets you have, right? Are we starting cold? Do we have to generate this from, do we need a list? How do we convert to get people into communities? Then you want to do your research. You want to find, what are the competitive communities? What are people talking about? What is the content that you want to filter in, filter out? Yeah. You got to choose your platform, convert the audience into community. So your audience into community, then you need to launch it, and then you need programming. And that is what happens and what you do when people enter and are in the community. How do you keep it alive and active?
Right.
Did I miss anything?
No, that was great summary. Good job.
Cool. Great podcast. Thanks.
Yeah, have a good one.
All right. So talk to me about, like, now that we kind of have the lay of the land, finding competitive communities. Why start there?
There's a couple reasons. I mean, for me, as I'm approaching the competitive analysis, what I'm trying to figure out is what are the differences between us and them? If you have this, let's say, competitor that's already has a thriving community in this space, can we step in and offer anything different than what's being offered? which isn't a deal breaker if it feels very similar, but it is the ability to really niche down in a community and speak to, just like in marketing, and speak to a very targeted group of people really transforms the ease of conversion. So it's mostly for information. I have to tell you that on a personal philosophy, I don't care about competition. I don't look at competition. I don't worry about competition, not in anything that I do. I think it's a waste of time. I also think it primes my brain in ways that aren't particularly helpful. So when we do it for clients, it's mostly because we're trying to understand, like, is there a lane that they're going to occupy that's not already occupied? But it's not to say, like, copy this, don't do that, that sort of thing. We also look at other people's pricing models. So that's really helpful too.
Totally. So you're kind of looking for less, what are my competitors doing, and more what exists or what needs are being served already, and is there kind of a community, or is there a subsegment of the community where there isn't really a space for them?
Yeah, we always do an XY matrix for some of the strongest value props around the space, whatever the space is. So if we can plot that out and see, like, oh, look at this unoccupied space. Sometimes there's a reason it's unoccupied, and then sometimes it's just that no one's come along.
Gotcha. So now that you've kind of found the framing for the community, hey, we're going to occupy this space. We're going to serve left-handed owners of parrots, and that's it.
Left-handed owners of what? Parrots?
Parrots. Yeah.
Holy crap. That's great.
This is a very odd niche, very specific.
Very specific, yeah.
Very, probably a bit too specific, but you kind of get the...
But they're going to be so excited they found each other, so it's great.
Right? Yeah, I mean, holding a parrot in your right hand is totally different than your left. It's like scissors all over again.
It's true. The pen's dragging, yeah.
Totally. The like 7 left-handed folks listening are like, yeah, scissors suck.
They understand me.
They get it. So once you've kind of found the niche or the space that you want to occupy, and you've got your kind of assets, the next piece is like figuring out what are the things that we're going to talk about, and that's the gummy search, and kind of finding out what conversations are happening already. Like, how does it tie together?
Yeah, how does what tie together? Wait, tell me the two pieces together.
The niche space. So we found like the space we're going to occupy, and then I guess we got to figure out what we're going to write about, or what the community is going to talk about, and that's the kind of gummy search piece. Might follow.
Yeah. Gummy search does help you find topics, but that is just for me anyway. That's a very small piece. That's not the thing that's going to dictate what we talk about. Internally, I organize the idea of programming around a series of changes. So I'll give an example. I think about when this person's joining this community. A year from now, how is their life any different because they joined the community? Like, year is long enough to see it, and not too long that it feels very ambiguous. So let's say that I'm launching a community for amateur photographers who want to turn professional photographer. I would start to brainstorm a list of all of the things that they need to know to make that happen. They need to stay up on artistic trends. They need to understand equipment, contracts, how to build a digital portfolio. There's all of these things that you're going to want to know. How do you price your services? What sort of photography to specialize in? And then I will assign like kind of one per month, loosely, one concept per month. And in my head, as a community manager, it's like, ooh, this month we can do a guest speaker on this topic. Now I have like a monthly theme where I can bring in a guest expert and teach about this thing. Now I have some ideas around conversations that we can have around this thing. Now I have a loose programming idea for a year. But a couple things to know is I'm never prescriptive or obvious about it. It's not like, happy March, everybody, it's contracts month. It's just something that I bring up in conversation, and sort of sometimes it builds and sometimes it dies, and that's good information. But it just allows you the piece to know that you have some sort of plan for moving them towards progress. So that a year from, let me tell you what I don't like about communities. I do not like communities of pontification. Nobody needs more theorizing on end in the business world and not taking action. Like, we're already gorging information and becoming obese on podcasts and books and stuff. Like, instead, I want to see people implement and actually do work. So for me, when I'm working with clients, that helps me understand like how we can move them from point A to point B. Does that make sense?
I hear you. I think thing I'd love to know is the monthly themes. So do you choose you get your 12 monthly themes.
Yeah. Loosely.
And then loosely, you've got a monthly speaker, but every day you got to do something. And so to me, there's a gap in my brain between, okay, monthly speaker, what do I do every other day? And like, how do you organize that programming?
So I think about this. What you're talking about is what the community world calls rituals. So you'll hear that word a lot. And when I was first kind of getting into community and people would say rituals, it made me feel really weird. It sounded like some sort of religious ceremony that I didn't quite understand what they meant.
Sacrifice a goat kind of thing.
Or once a month. Rituals are let me back up a second. There's a 3-question litmus test that people can ask themselves when they're trying to figure out, is this community? Because a lot of times when I'm talking to people, they will say, oh, my community. And what they're talking about is their newsletter readers or their podcast listeners. And none of that is community, because that is you, one, speaking to many, one to many. And community is many to many. So you as a community manager, your job is not to keep speaking to people. Your job is to make it as easy as possible for them to speak to each other, because that's where the real stickiness comes in. So there's 3 questions. Is this community? One is, do they have shared purpose or goal, which is usually an easy one to say yes to. The second one is there rituals and repetition for them to return to, which is for a podcast, for example. If there's a weekly podcast, there's a ritual that they're returning to. So yes. Third one is the hard one, which is, are there many-to-many relationships being actively fostered? So programming, I think about in loosely yearly, quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily, just taking it down. So the example I gave you like a monthly theme. But there are daily conversations. There does need to be interactions daily. And that is the part that scares people the most. The idea of daily engagement just wakes people the hell out. And they always want to know, what's our plan for our engagement? And I just talked about this actually yesterday on LinkedIn, that engagement is not a strategy. Engagement is not a thing where we talk about like, what's our engagement strategy? Engagement is not the lead, and engagement is the lag. It's the product of having developed good relationships in the community. So there are some daily practices. So for example, I'm in this pet community because I'm sickly obsessed with my dog. And so I'm in a sheepadoodle community where all of us sheepadoodle owners congregate. It's like a couple 100,000 people in one of the most active communities I've ever seen. It's insane.
Sidebar, sheepadoodle? Like a Shiba and a poodle?
Old English sheepdog.
Old
English sheepdog and a poodle.
English sheep.
Yeah, studies have been done that they're objectively the best dog in the world. So you might want to study up on that. Sheepadoodle.
Yeah,
S-H-E.
Yeah, I found one. I found a cute dogs. They kind of, it reminds me of a Portuguese water dog almost.
Yeah, very, very similar. Very similar. They're so freaking wonderful. Every Monday they
have one.
Who?
My brother.
Might have one?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
It just looks like the dog, but I can't remember the actual. I know it's a doodle cross with something, and it's not a Portuguese water dog. It's something similar. Anyway, not important to the podcast.
Yeah, sorry. And we're back. Every Monday, there's a thread. What did you and your dog do this weekend? Post a photo every Monday, no matter what. Tons of photos. No dog owner doesn't like posting new photos of their dog. Mm-hmm. That's a ritual that happens on Mondays. And that's a really good idea of how these things often work. You'll be in communities where every Wednesday they'll welcome all their new members. The thing about it is you don't need to have like a regimented post every day, because as long as you are learning pretty consistently about your members and the experiences that they're having, a lot of organic conversations are going to come on their own. And your job is to connect people with each other by knowing so much about them that you can tag them in, to help, rather than you being the person who has to respond to everything. So there's a real tendency to want to overthink this and have an idea for what we're going to post every single day. That actually often backfires because it starts to feel very forced when maybe the whole community, very needy, love me. When maybe the whole community is moving towards a different sort of topic that they're all into, and then you're inserting your regimen. It's just it's so much less a concern than people think it is. Get good people in the room, ask a few thoughtful questions related to the topic. Everything's going to be fine.
So I want to stay on daily for a minute, because to me, I think this is the biggest, to your point, this is the biggest kind of stress piece. So do you have a daily engagement piece or a daily ritual for every day?
Ritual in the sense that it's the same thing? No. I'll usually, for myself personally, I'll usually have rituals 1 to 2 times a week. So that's it. The rest of it is not difficult, because whatever the subject is, it's a subject you think about all the time. If you're launching a brand community, it's around your company, it's around your space, it's around your business. You're never not thinking about that. You're never not seeing industry trends or this new offering or this tangential thing or like this new tactic. There's always in your orbit things that you're thinking about. And a community is as simple as sharing those thoughts through discussion. Like there's nothing more difficult about it than that. You're already thinking about it, share it with your community, ask them some questions around it. Eventually, you will get to the point where you become background for them. So there's this was brought to, the best example of this is I ran a community called Trends. It was through Sam Parr, who has The Hustle. And one day, it was a Facebook group, and one day there was a glitch, and Facebook kept showing us the posts in reverse order, meaning the very, very first things ever freaking posted in this community years ago when no one was in it. And it was so incredible because suddenly you were in this like time capsule where you were seeing this thing take shape. I think at that point, the community was about 14,000 people, very active. It was a great community. But when you saw those early days, you just saw Sam like post, a like, maybe a comment. Post, maybe a comment, a couple of comments. It was like just sort of dragging a boulder uphill for a second. But then you slowly see, and now some people are starting to post on their own. It's not Sam starting the conversation. Oh, now they're responding to each other. And you see him become less and less a part of the community as they start talking to each other. And that's when you know that you're really building something great, because you're not the focal point anymore. They're into each other.
Interesting. And that's the kind of many-to-many relationships being fostered.
Yeah.
And so if I can get back to the rituals or the kind of daily. So
yeah,
maximum, if I look at my week, you've got maximum 1 to 2 rituals a week. And then the rest of the week, I just do nothing or just talk to the community, or what else do I do?
The rest of the week is exactly, no, don't do nothing. The rest of the week is what I was saying a moment ago. Share the thoughts, like share the things that are going on in your world, turn them into discussion. What did you read this morning? Put it in there. You know, what did you hear this guy do? What is this company doing? What trick did you whatever it is, put it in there. You'll never run out of things to say. You're going to worry before you launch, but once you get there, you're not going to worry about things to say. And you're just going to find that eventually you have to think about it less and less because people are posting about their own things. I should pause and say, this is all predicated on a high value prop for your community and getting the right people in. Because if your community is clearly for this type of person and you were thoughtful about onboarding the right types of members, case study, I have a client who is a legacy publishing company. They still print quarterly magazines for horror and gore fans. So people who die hard love horror movies, okay? And they wanted to build a community. And so this community, what is it going to be though? Because if you go onto Reddit, if you go anywhere else, there are plenty of horror communities out there and horror forums. So like why should this exist when they already have so many options? And in that research phase, Gummy Search, along with a couple of others, what we found is it is a cantankerous world. People are always getting into fights over who's the best director, what movie had the best special effects. That's not horror, that's horror. If you like new horror, you're lame. It's just like they are very opinionated. And so a lot of these conversations would devolve really quickly into fights. So the value prop that sounds so simple is that we leaned on is we're going to launch this community, and it is going to be a no nonsense tolerance. No trolls, no gatekeepers, no edgelords, no combative people, none of that. You're going to be able to come in here and you're going to talk about anything you want related to this thing that you love so much, and you're never going to have to worry about people getting pissy or rude. And we held true to that. And because of that, it attracted all the right people who didn't want to be pissy or rude. I cannot tell you one community I have seen as engaged as that community from day one without the community manager having to post often. They just were so excited to talk to each other in an environment that they had been needing. So when I'm talking about like people put too much pressure on themselves about engagement, it's so much less of a concern if you're building the right place for the right people.
I hear that. It's that you found really strong product market fit. You found that really niche of unmet needs for a particular set of, or a particular community.
Yeah, there's a company called Late Checkout, and their tagline is "Connect the Disconnected," and that's it in a nutshell. You take disconnected people who would be happier to get there together. You get them in a room together, and it's like hosting a party. If you were hosting a party, you wouldn't have to go around and have one-on-one conversations with everyone in the room. You just knew you invited good people, and those you might have to make some introductions, but those conversations would start taking shape naturally.
Cool. So on a daily basis, we've got 1 to 2 rituals a week, and then the non-ritual days, you're just posting, this is what I saw, here are my thoughts, anybody, care to comment or that kind of thing.
Yeah. But I would say there's nuance in what you're saying, because the idea of like, here's my thoughts, anyone care to comment is very similar to social media, where you're like posting a thing and like maybe you throw in a question at the end for faux engagement when everyone knows you're not really asking that question. It's a little bit more, this one's hard for me to talk about, I have to say. So if you hear me fumbling, because I think this starts getting into the psychology, human behavior piece, which is obviously more complex than just post a picture of your dog. There is an anatomy to a good post. And this, I think, TBD, separates the men from the boys, so to speak, the women from whatever, the people from the people, in most communities. Am I allowed to cuss on this podcast?
Fuck yeah.
That was lovely. The shittiest communities I've ever been in are because they do not understand the anatomy of a good post. And I actually collect screenshots of bad posts. I might just make a book one day, but I feel like I'll get sued. Someone will recognize their post in there. So a good post has a clever mix, and not all of them. Some of them can be a little different, but a good post has a mix of background. So context is really important. A touch of vulnerability and humanity, and ends in some sort of open-ended discussion question that has been crafted to extend beyond, what do you guys think? And people miss that all the time. They don't put context. They ask yes or no questions. Yes or no questions have no place in community. Unless you're doing some sort of quick poll because you need to pull data for some reason, asking a question that they can just say yes or no to is super lame. Asking questions that are yes or no and then require you add more context. So for example, hey, are there any lizard owners in this community? Well, you're asking for a reason. You have a follow-up question, but now all you're going to get is yes or no. And then what are you going to do? Are you going to comment your follow-up where not many people are going to see it? Are you going to edit your post? So people need to think really critically, especially community managers, about the context in which they post. And that if you can't instill a little bit of vulnerability and humanness into your posts, it starts to get very sort of transactional, and it's not that interesting anymore. That's hard. That's hard to break down.
Clever mix of background context, touch of vulnerability, ends with an open-ended discussion question beyond a good discussion question beyond what do you think?
Yeah.
Love it.
I wrote a post called The Anatomy of a Good Post. So people can just go read that if they want it.
Send it to me after this, and I'll make sure we add it into the show notes so people can just click instead of having to find it.
Word.
All right. So we're doing that. That's kind of the daily daily things. Weekly, we've got, 1 to 2 rituals that we're doing. On a monthly basis, you're bringing in doing things like a guest speaker.
It's totally different for every community. It could be a guest speaker. It could be a group coaching call. It could be like a 1-day accelerator. It's very contextually different based on the community. I owned a dance studio. We had monthly master classes. We had biannual flash mobs. We had an annual concert. These rituals are important because if somebody falls out of the practice, so if somebody, let's say, stops coming to class and they're thinking about coming to class, it's always in the back of their head. Every June, they know, oh, it's flash mob time. Like, I'm going to get back in. I want to be in flash mob. And all of a sudden, they're reforming the habit. So these rituals are just something for people to know that they can return to.
Interesting. I remember my wife did yoga, and there was like a yoga a day for N days. I can't remember if it's like 40 days or 4 days or something, but they had that as a ritual that they did like once a year. She would stop, and then like suddenly she'd be like, you know what, it gave her a thing to attach to say, oh, you know what, I'm going to do this thing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly what it's for. And you just reminded me that since we're talking about the structure of programming in a community, I want to pull this up because I don't want to get it wrong. There is a framework that I use when I'm thinking about the programming, because the idea that it's contextually different all the time, you're going to find all different programming. You are running a community where you're probably not going to say, what did you and your dog do this weekend? But beyond the idea of 1 to 2 rituals, this monthly thing, there is the kind of dynamic programming. The dynamic programming piece is, it's not necessarily a ritual, but it's a way to regularly inject life, breathe life into your community by giving them different things to do, different things to think about. So I use a framework for this, CERC, CERC. And it stands for challenges, education, collaborations, and relationship. So I can actually, do you want me to do a quick breakdown?
I know you've got a hard stop. And so why don't you send the link and we can throw it in the show notes there. And
so I'll have to create it because it's actually for my members only, but I'll create a public page of it and show. But it categorizes and helps you think through different types of programming that you can layer on to keep people invested in the community.
Love it. Okay. So we've got daily, weekly, quarterly, and we can go to the kind of rituals, and you've got kind of 1 a year, a couple quarterly, 1 a month, couple a week, different types of engagement. We can look at the dynamic programming post if people want more. So I think that kind of helps answer my questions of like, what do you do, right? That was the biggest uncertainty I had. I've had communities in the past. We didn't do any of this and they just died. Apologies if you're still in the PredRevs plus Slack where...
Go close it.
I think we did, or I just turned it off and ignored it. So
and walked away.
My bad. Yeah, my bad. We talked a little bit about platform. Do you want to give me your kind of rapid fire on your favorite kind of tech platforms for this? If people are like, hey, what should I look at? What are the options that they should consider?
The first question that they should ask themselves is where are my people already hanging out? Are they already somewhere? Personally, I think Slack and Facebook groups make for terrible community platforms. I don't enjoy either of them, but 90% of the people I work with choose them anyway because their clients or their members are already there, and you're going to trade off traction for user experience always. So you kind of got to pick. If you're lucky enough to where they're not on really on Facebook, Slack, or they're agnostic, or it doesn't matter, then there are community-specific platforms out there, Circle, School, Mighty Networks, that were created just for community. So whereas Facebook and Slack were not created for community, and they're just sort of like being jerry-rigged to use for community, these are. And so they have the functionality that you need, engagement tools, onboarding, better analytics, that sort of thing. And in terms of what I recommend, they're all a little bit different, and it's just totally case by case. How much customization do you need? How simple, how complicated were you going with it? It's not a thing. What I always tell people is pick 3 possibilities, make a free trial account in all 3 of them because they all offer a free trial. Spend a couple hours in each, and you will know very quickly whether intuitively this is a platform that you can work with or not.
Cool. What are the top 3 that you would just blanket? They're not going to be perfect for everybody, but the top 3 that you would say, hey, if you're thinking about this, go check them out.
I build in Circle primarily, and then I've done also in School and Mighty. I have opinions about each of them, but much of which I'll keep to myself. But those are the three that tend to get built out the most.
Cool. I wanted to kind of fast forward on that one a little bit because I do appreciate you got a hard stop, and I did want to get to launching the community.
Yeah,
we talked about how to find your niche, how to program for it, choosing your platform. How do we launch the community? How do we get it off the ground?
So that's going to start with that conversion piece. And what I recommend is get your application ready, get your landing page ready, start building out an email sequence, 3 to 4, maybe 5 emails. Each of those emails is to drive them to the landing page to apply to be a founder. You get all your founder applications. You do whatever sort of screening you guys are going to do. It's different for everybody. As you're doing this, you're building the platform. You pick a launch date. So you always want to have a launch date and a virtual launch event like on Zoom. And then it's a matter of sending them the congratulations, getting them through onboarding into the platform. I always let people in 1 to 2 days before the launch event because I sort of want them in there meeting each other. It's a place where I can start communicating and reminding them. And then we get on Zoom together. And I generally tend to use the same launch day agenda every time. It's an hour long. It has an introduction, a couple breakout groups so they can meet each other. Very loose. Excuse me. There's something stuck in my throat. And that's it. That's all a launch entails. Seth Godin has a great post about the grand opening that I'm a big fan of, where he talks about like a lot of people put a lot of merit on launches, but it's really everything that happens post-launch that makes or breaks a product or brand. So for me, the launch is like the simplest. It's very exciting. It's really sweet to get into the room with people and see like, oh, this is the beginning of something. But it is definitely just like a small drop in the bucket of a community life cycle.
Gotcha. Is it like a hype day thing? Is it more of a conversation thing? Is it like, I remember the Techstars, it was like that first launch was kind of like what we're talking about. They played a little video. They had, everybody was really excited. Is that the kind of the feel of it? Or is it just kind of, hey, we're going to jump on and say hello? I'm going to talk.
Oh, I hype it up. It should be a celebration. Yeah, it's definitely hype. There's a little bit about you. You're gonna introduce yourself. You're gonna introduce the community, what they can expect, blah, blah, blah. And then get them into breakout rooms together. That part is really important if it's a big enough group with a couple of like good, thoughtful conversation starters. Here's one good tip. Don't ever tell people just to introduce themselves. Don't do that. Get into a room, introduce yourself. People get very long-winded when they introduce themselves, and it doesn't really tend to go anywhere. So instead, have them introduce themselves in Slack or chat while you're, hey, what's your name? Where are you from? What do you do? They can put it on there. If people want to read it, fine. They'll get to know each other later. So you want to give them conversation starters that actually help them get to like the meat of the other person past surface. And you'll see such a difference. When you send them into the breakout room, they'll be like this. And then when you bring them back, they're like smiling and animated because they actually built rapport with someone. Makes a huge difference.
Love that. I wanted to keep asking questions, but I appreciate you've got a hard stop and somebody at the airport that needs to be picked up.
Yeah. I mean, for a couple minutes over, we won't die. But yeah.
Fair. Okay. Then I do have one last kind of question on the after the launch day. How do you keep, like, what's your process for continuing to add people into the community? Is it still gated with that application? How does that work?
I think gated for a while. Yeah. The gating does happen for a while. The verbiage on the landing page changes, and I say founding member applications are closed, join the wait list. I always want to create tension there. And personally, when I launch communities, like for me, and which I am in 2 weeks, my membership launches, I'm going to keep it. I said that I would accept 40 founding members, so I wanted to start small. And I will keep it that way for 3 to 6 months, depending on how it goes, before I start opening to other people. Now, everyone's goals are different. My goals for this membership might be very different from another brand, but I tend to keep just founding members for a while you really build the intimacy of that group and learn before opening back up to let more people in. Eventually, you can make your process easier, but I still don't believe that it should ever be a click to join process. I think a little bit of friction is healthy. Yeah.
Interesting. Cool. That gives me a lot to think about. I do want to say this episode is going to come out probably a week or two after that community, your community is launched. And so
Yeah.
my last question is, how can people apply to join your community?
Oh, that's sweet. Well, my community is for solopreneurs and solo builders who want to learn how to build strategic communities. So they can go to wondry.com/join if they want to read about it. Or just go to Wondry and say hi. Come say hi to me.
Perfect. And that's wondry.com/join.
Join. Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
That's
April, thank you so much for coming on the show. If people are looking to get in touch with you outside of the community, they want to say hire you for, help with community, or they just want to reach out and say thanks, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
They can find me on LinkedIn, super easy, or they can shoot me an email, a@wondry.co.
Love it.
Yeah.
So your email is a@wondry.co, and then the website is .com, just to make sure I got that correct.
It's also .co, Wondry.co. Did I say .com? Oy vey.
I said .com.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So Wondry.co, link in the show notes, just so we don't screw that up.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us today, April. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
You bet.
Okay.
And thanks to everybody for listening. We'll catch y'all next week.